thank you for joining us for this last session of these 2 days, but definitely a case of last but not least. We've got 2 panel discussions coming up, and the first one is on the subject of social commerce. And to talk to us about that, we have two people. Firstly, over on my far right, Marta Obrebska. I knew I'd say it wrong. Obrebska. Okay, better. Now, Marta works for Dell, which you will all know. She leads social marketing strategy there in the consumer and small business segment. So that's interesting because you're dealing with both audiences. So very useful. She works with global teams and covers marketing, online, and communications. And she's been with Dell for over 5 years. And before that, you worked for consultancies, marketing communications consultancies in New York. And she's currently just managing a move as well from London to Italy, as well as on top of all her other responsibilities. And also Ruth Coates here. Hi, Ruth. Ruth works for Staples. Staples, I'm sure you all know Staples. It's an enormous US-based... Thank you, Philippe. Very helpful. That's our countdown clock there. Staples, enormous US office supplies. Best way to describe it? Office supplies company?
Yeah, office supplies, facilities, technology, all your office needs.
There you go, everything. And which is now in Europe as well. And you are the European marketing manager and lead Staples' social media strategy across 15 European countries. So thanks both for joining us. And I'm going to start with you, Marta. And I think it would be good as well if you could just give us a brief introduction to you and what you do. And I think maybe the first question it would be good to ask is just to define for us what social commerce means to you at Dell.
Hi, good afternoon. Hope everybody got their cup of coffee. I certainly needed one. Yes, I mean, I think a disclaimer at the beginning is I sit in the marketing organization, which is automatically going to explain a lot in terms of what we're after, what are the KPI at the end of the day that we're all focused on. And certainly commerce, sales, bottom line, generating revenue, all that kind of stuff is kind of key to what we do as marketeers. And social has just kind of became an enabler, a new set of tools that we can get closer to customers, understand customers, and ultimately drive sales. So from a marketing perspective, social is kind of part of our DNA. It's everything that we do. Having a heritage as a direct company that Dell, it has been since its inception. Social just kind of became something that kind of was a natural extension. So commerce for us means anything that ultimately leads to monetization. And I think maybe I'll just use one slide. Is that the one? Next one, here it is. It's just a short synopsis of kind of our ecosystem from the kind of social commerce perspective. It's the heart of everything we do as a brand. It's part of our DNA, but it really starts, and I've heard this I think a couple of times before, with listening. And I think any marketing 101, knowing your customers, knowing who they are, what they want, where they are in a social sphere is I think a #1 priority. So this is kind of what we do. And through that listening, we learn where these pockets of customer clusters are and how to speak to them, what to offer them in terms of advice, in terms of support. We've got dedicated channels that deal specifically with that. We do a lot of lead generation through social. So we've got certified sales and marketing reps that listen to conversations every day. And based on some of the keywords, they're able to identify these conversations and step in at the right time, in the right place. And by offering guided advice, they're able to influence that purchase touch point. We look at things that offer value, utility, so whether it's specific apps on Facebook or contests, something that meets the expectations of our users. And I think finally, it's important, I think, for any brand is to generate a share of voice, to kind of be able to kind of share our story from our perspective, because we know our brand is talked about from our customers' perspective daily, and we have a choice of either stand back and just observe, or to also enter that conversation and try to steer it in a direction that we would like to go. So all of these things ultimately lead to monetization, and there's kind of different ways we track that. From the kind of ROI perspective, it's not just about direct attribution. It's really about, as I said, lead generation. I think is a very interesting one for us, especially in a B2B space, where technology purchase is a much more considered purchase. There's a lot of touch points, a lot of peer reviews, expert advice that you need to kind of get before you make your choice, all through SEO impact that we track as a result of a lot of the social content we put out there. And I think some of you might have heard, some of the success stories that Dell had in kind of leveraging social for customer care and reducing a lot of the support costs.
Thank you for that introduction. Ruth, let's hear from you about Staples and what social commerce means there, because it's a very different type of business. It started as a bricks and mortar business, so you've had a different evolution. So tell us. Yeah,
and just to add to what Martha said, I also sit in the marketing function, and while there's certainly a lot of interdependency, I think, across functions within an organization for social media to really work effectively, ultimately, considering it sits within marketing, we are very much about understanding how social can generate traffic and sales for us. And I think we would define social commerce as being the use of social media, not just social media platforms, but actually social media tools, and use of user contribution to drive traffic and sales before, during, and after purchase. Because I think, to some of the points with Martha, it's not necessarily always going to be a direct purchase, but, understanding the influence social may have during the path to purchase. So like Matthew said, we do have a history of being a bricks and mortar company. We are also very much a direct response company, using a lot of paper-based marketing materials. And ultimately, we recognize that we want to enable our customers to shop in a way that's easiest for them. And as we began this journey in Europe about 12 months ago now, we really are seeing that there has been a lot of opportunity for us there. People and customers and prospects really do want to engage with us and talk with us and buy from us via social media.
And we've heard a lot about engagement today. We heard about crowdsourcing this morning, building these relationships with customers and potential customers. But how do you go that last mile or centimetre or whatever it is to get them to the purchase point? How do you do that?
Well, I think for us at Staples, the first thing I would say is, to us, social media is absolutely not about the hard sell. It's not the right way to use social media. It's not effective. You can actually do a lot more damage by spamming people with these so-called opportunities to buy. If people want to buy from you, they can do, and I think everyone knows that. I think it's very important to look also at your own objectives in terms of why you want to use social media, and be conscious of, if you're going to sell via social media, what you're actually achieving with that. Looking at the lifetime value of customers. Is someone just buying with you via social media now because there's a good deal, or what is that person going to be worth to you over the course of their relationship with you? And also looking at your acquisition versus your retention objectives. Again, do you have existing customers buying from you on social media because you're offering a good deal there today? And they're not necessarily new prospects. So I think it's very important to look at that. And once you've really identified what those objectives are, and really identified what people want from you in social media. People are not necessarily on your social media profiles because they want to buy from you there. They may want, to get new information about new products and services that you're offering, or they may just want to have an additional communication channel with you. You really have to understand why they want to be there in the first place. And then, like you said, once you understand that about the people who are engaging with you on the profiles, you can really build your planning from there. Where you do find that people want to buy from you on your social media platforms, where your data, your information from your measurement and your monitoring of your profiles is showing you that, I think for us at Staples, the best thing we can do is look to facilitate that, make that easy. And the ways that we can do that is by making sure our social profiles are integrated with our offerings in our retail channel and in our online space. Integrated again for any mobile presence that we have, making sure that we have share buttons, click to share buttons, and making sure that we're leveraging the functionality that's available within the individual profiles, such as Facebook, where they have Facebook deals, etc.
I think from our perspective, we kind of have an 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time of the budget, it's really around brand building. It's about the engagement. When we talk about the content that you use to bring your brand closer to your customers, telling stories, sharing testimonials, focusing on the customer. And 20 is really the direct response, the transactional aspect. And there is room for it, absolutely. I mean, but I think it's important to strike that right balance so that you don't kind of, as you say, spam, because you've invested so much in building these communities and you don't want to kind of take advantage of that trust you've built by kind of basically replicating your traditional Markham mass blasting activities. So there is room for the direct response and transactional, and we do that, and we do it through kind of a variety of ways. I think one is through some of the targeted channels. So for example, we've got Twitter channels that are dedicated to deals, or Dell Outlet, which offers kind of refurbished computers for a really good deal, and people join those channels because the value proposition is very clear. They know what they're getting, and by giving them offers on a regular basis, we're not breaking that trust. But at the same token, on Facebook, we spend most of our time trying to tell stories, but when we do something transactional, we try to make it a bit more fun and engaging. So a good example, this week we just launched a star search game in UK, France, and Germany, and it's kind of a very kind of a neat functionality. You look at the starry sky, you can click on different stars, and you can win coupons and systems. But the response has been very positive because we're offering utility, we're offering something a bit social. Yeah, at the end of the day, it does drive tangible sales for us. But because it's still within the social experience, the fans and followers welcome that. If we just pushed out a deal on them every week, I think, and we've tried that, we've tested, the velocity of how often, can we push out deals and offers, not, and we see that you don't want to do it too often because then you start alienating your fan base.
And I think, just to add to that as well, I think we've all seen a number of Facebook stores that initially started up, closed down, and I think there has been just a misconception that you can apply just hard selling techniques in social media. And
we had a Facebook store we tried and tested, and it works. I know a lot of retailers. I didn't ask the Yves Saint Laurent marketing manager, but that's probably the type of product that could sell very well through Facebook. I think when you talk about harder, high consideration products, we tried replicating a very compelling experience on Facebook, but it just didn't work for us.
It seems like all the brands we've been hearing from today, including your two, are building up lots of data on customers, lots of engagement with customers, often the same sort of like-minded customers perhaps. And I just wonder, are we yet in a position where brands are working together, sharing some of this information? I don't know whether you have this experience yourselves or you see it in others, or is everyone trying to guard all of their information? How much sharing is there that goes on?
I mean, I think best practice sharing, yes. I mean, events like this are a prime example. Case studies with some of our partners. So we've had marketing social campaigns with partners like Microsoft at Intel. But when it comes to kind of hard data, especially customer data, scouting your fan social grid with the CRM tools, I think that's very proprietary. So I think there's a lot of legal implications, which, I would love to see in more detail into how other brands are handling this, but I think it's kind of information that no one really is open to talk about.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think we have to be very careful in the social space around customer privacy and prospect privacy. But certainly best practice sharing is very important to us at Staples. Amongst, we have, as you mentioned, 15 different countries around Europe. So taking what we can and learning from that and sharing that across countries. But what I would say is that I don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all approach, and I think we may touch on this later, but with different countries and different cultures and different languages, you really have to look at the local market conditions and really apply what's right for that market. And again, that is very dependent on you understanding your customers locally and listening to the conversations that are happening on your profiles and monitoring those to make sure that you're then providing the solution that's correct for those people's needs.
Well, it's an interesting point. Let's touch on it now then, because you both work for big American companies, but you're both responsible for marketing here in Europe. And your two companies, I mean, Staples has been in Europe only since for a few years, hasn't it?
Largely since we have had presence for quite a number of years in Europe, but really grew our presence in Europe from 2008.
Okay,
yes.
So when you're implementing a social commerce strategy, just talk to us a bit about how you adapt that for different cultures and countries.
And I think that, one of the key things to mention here is, as I've already kind of said, really there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And when we look at, taking an overarching strategy, which we've built within Staples and done some listening pieces to really understand, do people want to interact with us in this space? And if so, how do they want to do that? And actually applying plans, go-to-market plans around that. We work with, each of our local teams works on that at a local level. And that even comes down to, individual platform selection. So, we obviously have the Facebooks of the world, which have been around for quite a while now. They reached their 1 billionth user in September. Do we want to have a presence there? Does that make sense for us? Versus using Twitter, where, we have the use of hashtags, which can be great from a promotional point of view, but then you're limited by the number of characters you can use. Obviously, the growth in Pinterest, which we all know is, adding a new dimension, growing very quickly, much more creative in terms of being very visual. Google Plus, and the impact of that on search ranking and also the opportunity with the Hangouts. Ultimately, each of our local teams needs to decide where users are going to want to have the conversation and make the decision about each profile and where they will actually place activity at a local level.
How about for you, Marta, just this dealing with this sort of cultural differences? How much impact does that have on a social commerce strategy?
I mean, it probably has more impact on the content strategy, which kind of feeds into the social commerce strategy. But I mean, we've learned, we've kind of tried to rely on a global content calendar, for example, as a base. But we soon learned that, you can probably adapt it in 99th percentile to the UK market. But when you start adapting it to Germany or France or Italy, the nuances, what really works, what your local fan base accepts and enjoys and responds to are quite large. So, you end up kind of needing to really tailor your content strategy. Similar, I think, with the kind of the social commerce activities. A lot of the concepts that come to us kind of during our quarterly planning come originally from the US, which not all of them work. And we know, for example, Foursquare is not really big in many markets. Twitter is huge in the UK. Not many people care about Twitter in Germany. So even if the program structure kind of remains consistent, you really need to adapt it, and depending on which market you're targeting, you need to pick different platforms. So Germany, for example, on our B2B side, we work with the equivalent of LinkedIn, Xing, that the German market really seems to kind of have adopted. So yeah, it's a lot, and I wish you could have one size fits all, but unfortunately there's a lot of localization need to do.
And like you mentioned, a number of markets still do have their own offerings. So, for example, in the Netherlands, we also have Hives, and like you mentioned, in Germany, Xing. And I think it's important not to lose sight of those platforms also, because they can be very important to the local communities and to people in individual countries. And I think a lot of people have a tendency to think about the big four, really, when we talk about social media.
So does that mean, you mentioned Twitter in Germany, for example, does that mean you're not on Twitter in Germany? Do you make choices to say, no, we're not going to? Because it must be very tempting to think, no, but we should probably be there just because others are there. I mean, do you do that?
No, we are, and I think you just can't afford not to be, because it is becoming. It's just maybe it's a little bit behind the curve. So we are, but I think when we apply benchmarks, when we compare the performance of different markets, we need to kind of put a little filter to say, you can't really look at Germany because it's at a different stage of development from, let's say, where UK was with that platform, 2 years ago. So you are, and you try different things, and the good thing about my role, for example, is I'm not responsible specifically for country campaigns or marketing plans. I kind of have an overseeing role, whereas I feed the best practices, the strategy to the local team, so I can say, these guys have worked on this platform 2 years ago. This is what they learned. Here, apply it to your market. So I think you just need to keep on evolving and trying new things. And yeah, sometimes you have to kind of throw your hat in the ring and say, what, actually that platform maybe is never going to happen here, and let's maybe focus on something else.
So thinking globally again about social commerce, what are some of the biggest challenges you face in putting in place a social commerce strategy? I'll start with you, Ruth.
Sure. So I think I could probably identify 3 major challenges that I certainly found we faced in implementing our strategy around Europe. The first is really selling the concept of using social media for commerce reasons internally. So not just to senior management, but as I mentioned earlier, there is massive interdependency across functions, certainly merchandising departments, IT, customer care departments, and it's very important that you have all those functions on board and that you have cross-functional teams ready to really move forward in the social space. I think the second challenge that we faced was really in growing our capability in the space. We very much took the stance that we did not want to just have presence for the sake of presence. We wanted to make sure that we understood why we were going to be in the social space if our customers really wanted us to be there, to engage with us there. And we don't have a heritage in that area, so we really needed to make the decision of how we were going to move forward there and really grow the capabilities of all of and the resource levels of our teams to move forward in that space. And I think the third area is really, what's going to work for us, not really knowing, having the answer. And I think Marta mentioned this already, but very much testing and learning in the space so that, we develop robust understanding of what is actually going to work here, what does engage people, what does drive them to buy from us. And not just the direct sale, but actually, as I said earlier, also understanding the influence that social interactions can have in the path to purchase from an indirect point of view also.
How about for you, Marta?
I can definitely relate to all of you said, but I think the biggest one is the kind of the multi-attribution. It's the role of social in the whole customer journey, and it's not linear. It's just, you can probably, everybody has a different model of what it looks like, but there's a lot of touch points, and some of them you can capture and measure and track, many you can't. And I think the biggest challenge for me personally is to convince some of our die-hard marketeers who are still operating at a more of a kind of a less strict attribution model in their minds, and then the kind of direct response that, yes, out of all these things we've done, maybe 10% driven some direct traffic to Dell.com, but look at the share of voice we've generated. Look at the conversations that we help initiate. Look at the sentiment that this product is discussed, and we had to kind of create new metrics and new reporting and start really feeding that into kind of the executive suite to say, these KPIs matter. You really have to start looking at them because not everything will have a direct impact on the bottom line. And it's it's an ongoing battle, and it's some things I think I need to kind of fight every day because there's a tendency to say, how much traffic did you in today? And I say, well, directly this much, but indirectly, we've got 30 million impressions, and how do you value that?
So what are the best ways to measure? How do you want to measure the impact of social commerce activity?
So I think we've got a couple of, we're working on some kind of an internal model that will kind of consolidate everything and ideally just come up with a number. Because it's, one number is easier to communicate than 5 KPIs that people are not really familiar with. So, but yeah, a few things that I've mentioned. So definitely the direct attribution, you do want to know how much traffic you're driving, how many sales you've impacted through things like offers and deals, and you want to be looking at the share of voice. And we actually are now in a kind of a journey we've started in terms of a brand transformation, what Dell stands for, what we communicate to the market, and we track very. We started aligning all of our brand metrics with a lot of our social share of voice metrics, and kind of see how that trends. And kind of see what the relationship is. So hopefully, through some of the social conversations we're impacting the consideration of a brand in the market. So there's definitely one we're very keen to kind of keep on looking at. And another metric that we also started recently looking into is NPS. So NPS for us in general is a kind of a key metric that even our personal plans have an NPS target.
Is this the
net promoter score? Yeah, sorry for the jargon.
Not everyone's a marketing.
Exactly. So it's basically how likely are you going to recommend. So it's the promoters versus detractors, and we start looking at the NPS scores of our fan base and comparing it to how this differs from our regular customers. Can we get some insights whether the social interaction has helped to move the score one way or another? If, let's say, if it's much higher, then that means our social fan base is a group of advocates. So let's activate them. Let's figure out a way to, really engage them more and more. If it turns out that the NPS is lower for a specific group on social, then we have a problem. It's also actionable, So I think the key thing that, you really want to come up with metrics that can be actionable, because it's nice to have a dashboard that you can float around, but frankly, what does it mean? What action can you drive from the metrics that you capture?
For Staples, I think firstly, just to say, obviously, measurement is absolutely vital. We need to have measurement to not just understand the return on investment, but also to understand how the campaigns we're putting in place are working, how effective they're being in themselves, and that's also why. Which leads me on to say that there are different ways to measure things depending on the different levels of activity that you're looking at. So, for example, a community manager is going to be measuring the engagement levels on the page, and how that affects EdgeRank on Facebook, and therefore, how well the Facebook page is going. So understanding engagement and numbers of likes and those kind of metrics do remain important. But when you talk about then understanding the bigger picture, it does come back to traffic and sales. And while direct sales and traffic is certainly a little bit easier to measure through coupons, through deals, through analytics tools, especially through to the web. The real area of interest for us at the moment is in that attribution models and understanding how you can look at the influence that any interactions on social media are having in the path to purchase. And there's some good tools coming out at the moment, because I think there has been a little bit of a lack of tools available to enable brands to be able to do them. There's some good tools coming out at the moment to actually make that much more feasible. And I think it's something we'll really see grow in the next 6 months.
Okay, before I ask you another question, I think it's probably time just to do a quick check of the room in case someone's got a burning thing that they would like to ask Marta or Ruth, and we can get a microphone to them. Any questions? Put your hand up if you have one. I can't see any, but that's partly because the light's sort of dazzling me. No, not yet. Then I was going to ask, and I mentioned it earlier, that you have both business and consumer in your remit. Staples sells presumably direct to businesses as well as to consumers, but I don't know if that's part of what you cover as well. But it does as well. It's just interesting to know whether there are differences then in the way that you look at these two and how you deal with them, and whether the challenges are any different. Maybe I'll start with you, Ruth.
Sure. Actually, I think that's a really great question, because we do operate a lot in the B2B space, and I think a lot of people would assume that social media is not actually relevant for that space. And it actually comes back a little bit to how I define social commerce, not just as the use of social media in terms of platforms, but in terms of tools also. And I think that one area people may tend to forget a little bit about is actually how you can use monitoring of the social media space to drive traffic and sales, or leads and sales. And you can actually listen to conversations that are going on in the space and use them to gain competitive advantage. Use them to understand areas where your target audience may actually be looking for things from you, and then jump in there with solutions. And you can also use that monitoring to get some feedback on campaigns that you have run, or maybe on some activity that you're already taking. And I think that's really important for us. So while in the consumer space, a lot of the consumer platforms and profiles on those platforms are quite important, I think monitoring from a business intelligence point of view is very important for us in the B2B space.